These strange cases and unsolved mysteries continue to puzzle researchers and investigators, even as new information that could help crack the cases comes to light. But in some cases, these twists only lead to more questions. Number 10. It's extremely rare for a person and their vehicle to go missing. Often when this happens, the unfortunate outcome of the case is that both the vehicle and the missing person are in a body of water somewhere. So it was a shocking twist when an update in the missing person case of Tony Bledsoe suggested that wasn't the case. Tony was just 24 years old at the time of his disappearance. He lived in the small town of Arcadia, Indiana, and was the father of 2 young boys. Unfortunately, there isn't much information available in this case. Tony's son has spoken about his father, but he was only 5 years old when Tony vanished and has few memories of his father. One thing he does remember is Tony's love of cars. He had a black and gray 1971 Oldsmobile Cutlass with a vanity license plate reading TJ's Toy. He enjoyed driving fast and had a few speeding tickets, but there's no record of any serious run-ins with the law. Tony previously worked at the Dana Corp, a company that makes car parts. But at the start of March of 1992, Tony was laid off. It's not known if he'd found any other work by the time he disappeared just a few weeks later. The last time Tony was seen was on March 16, 1992. He left his home at around 10 a.m. and drove his Oldsmobile Cutlass south along Indiana 19, apparently heading towards Noblesville, Indiana. He had only $8 in his pocket and an eighth of a tank of gas. All his other personal belongings were left behind. It's not clear where his intended destination was, or if he ever made it to any location. He would never return home, though. Tony was reported missing the following day. There are few details about the initial search effort in Tony's case, but the following month, human remains were located in Putnam County, but the family was able to confirm this wasn't their missing loved one. They indicated Tony had a scar or a tattoo that would have made him identifiable easier. Tony's case quickly went cold. The route he's believed to have taken on the day that he went missing passes over many bodies of water. For years, it was speculated that he may have accidentally lost control of his car while going over one of these bridges and ended up in the water. In 2023, efforts were made to try to search some of these bodies of water using sonar, but they fell through. The organization Exploring with a Mission also took a look at Tony's case, identifying many possible locations where his car may have entered the water. But unfortunately, they couldn't find the missing man or his car. But in October of 2024, there was a shocking update in the case. Indiana State Police spent hours on October 2nd, 2024, searching a residence in the small town of Atlanta, Indiana. The town is just home to over 700 people and is located just 3.5 miles north of Arcadia. The police towed 2 Oldsmobile Cutlass cars from the residence. Neighbors reported that they'd never seen the vehicles being driven around. Nobody was arrested at the time, and the police did not publicly reveal what they were investigating. But according to a local journalist investigating the case, multiple sources confirmed the search was in relation to Tony's disappearance. His son also believes this was the case. Since then, there have been no new updates on this case. What happened to Tony in March of 1992 remains a mystery. Number 9. Dinosaurs are some of the most fascinating and well-studied creatures to have ever lived on this planet. The animals have captured the attention of scientists and the general public for centuries, but there are still many things we don't know about these creatures. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding dinosaurs is when and where they evolved. The term dinosaur refers to a whole group of reptiles, most of which lived hundreds of millions of years ago. Specifically, these were reptiles that evolved to have certain bones near the hips fused together. All reptiles have at least 2 of the vertebrates in their lower back fused together, but all dinosaurs have at least 3. This includes their modern descendants, birds, who can have up to 12. The reason for these fused bones is the way early dinosaurs walked. They were bipedal, walking on 2 legs, and needed better support at the hips to do that. But when and where this evolution took place is a mystery. The earliest dinosaur fossils we have date back to around 230 million years ago, but these aren't the fossils of a single creature. Instead, it's an entire ecosystem of dinosaurs and other animals that were alive at that time. All these dinosaurs had a few things in common, like being generally smaller than the more famous ones. but they're all very different creatures. This shows that they'd been evolving from a common dinosaur ancestor for millions of years. New research conducted by the University of College London and the Natural History Museum in London has shown that this common ancestor might not have originated where scientists originally thought. Scientists have been looking in Argentina and Zimbabwe for evidence of this original dinosaur. It was here that the earliest known fossils have been found, but now scientists believe that the earlier dinosaur fossils may be further north. Researchers looked at the fossils that have already been discovered and compared them to models of what the planet would have looked like in the Triassic period. This was a time when the Earth's landmass was grouped into two supercontinents. There was Laurasia in the north, which made up modern-day North America, Europe, and Asia, and Gondwana in the south, made up of South America, Africa, Australia, Antarctica, and India. Researchers also looked at where few fossils have been found. Rather than concluding that there was nothing there, they assumed that fossils hadn't been discovered yet. These regions included places like the heart of the Amazon rainforest and much of Africa. By looking at the climate and later populations, scientists concluded that dinosaurs likely originated in a region of low-latitude Gondwana. This region was hot and dry and made up of desert and savanna-like conditions. Today it corresponds to the Amazon, Congo Basin, and the Sahara Desert, all places that are difficult for researchers to access. Scientists believe it was only later that dinosaurs evolved and adapted to relatively cooler climates elsewhere on the globe. As they adapted to different environments, they began creating the large array of dinosaurs that we already have discovered in other parts of the globe. Of course, until the common dinosaur ancestor is found and fossils from other parts of the family tree are pieced together, scientists cannot be sure what the actual answer to this mystery is. Number 8. Ever since the first spacecraft to pass Mars sent back images to Earth, we've learned more and more about the red planet. But some of the information that scientists learned left them scratching their heads. New data sent from NASA's InSight lander could help to solve a mystery that's been puzzling scientists for 50 years. The Viking orbiters took countless detailed images of Mars, allowing scientists to study the surface of the planet for the first time. One of the first things they noticed is that Mars is split into two halves. The difference is most clear when looking at an elevation map. 2/3 of the planet's northern hemisphere is covered in lowlands. These are roughly 3 miles lower in elevation than the rest of the planet. The crust here is much thicker than at the north of the planet, meaning it reaches further down into Mars's molten mantle. This division, known as the Martian dichotomy, has puzzled scientists for decades. One of the leading theories was that the source of the dichotomy is external. Scientists speculated that a catastrophic collision could have happened sometime early in the planet's life, which redistributed the rock on the surface of Mars. This may have been similar to the collision which created Earth's moon. The main problem with this theory was that such an impact site hadn't been located. Mars is littered with craters from meteorite impacts, mostly in the southern hemisphere, but none of these came from something that had such an impact on the entire planet. But new data, published at the end of 2024, provides evidence for another theory. This one suggests that the cause for this dichotomy is internal. On Earth, one of the main ways scientists learn about what exists beneath the crust is through analyzing seismic waves. The way these waves change direction and speed provides insight into the materials they're traveling through. The same thing can be done by looking at seismic waves from Marsquakes. NASA's InSight lander is located near the border between the high and lowlands. This meant it could collect data from both sides of the divide. The data showed an obvious difference between waves traveling in the north and those in the south. Scientists say this points to the molten rock in the south of the planet being much cooler than in the north. Molten rock at the north of the planet is sinking towards Mars's core, while rock at the south pushes upwards, thickening the crust there and pushing it away from the core. This seems to suggest that the cause of Mars's dichotomy lies beneath the surface. Today, Mars has only one tectonic plate, which remains stationary above the planet's molten interior. This is known as a stagnant lid, but this wasn't always the case. Early in the planet's history, the tectonic plates drifted like here on Earth. Scientists believe the larger plates drifted to the south before they became frozen in place millions of years ago. But while there's now more evidence for this theory, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is correct. Scientists are still gathering more data on the planet, and it's possible some new insight could indicate that a collision event could be behind this strange mystery after all. Number 7. Some of the most mysterious noises ever heard come from here on Earth, deep beneath the surface of the ocean. Even though scientists usually determine a general source of these noises, many remain unidentified for years. In 2024, new research solved the mystery of the source of a strange noise nicknamed the biotwang. The Western Pacific biotwang was first recorded in 2014 in the deepest part of the ocean. The Mariana Trench is located just south of Japan. It was created by the old Pacific tectonic plate being pushed beneath the small, younger Mariana plate. The movement forms a trench that reaches a depth of roughly 36,000 feet, the deepest point on the planet. Life in these extreme conditions has fascinated scientists for decades. It's far from any source of light, and the pressure is very high. In 2014, scientists used autonomous vehicles known as passive acoustic ocean gliders to conduct an ocean survey of the area. This could provide some clues as to the life and other activities in the region. Most of the noises were what scientists expected, but there were multiple strange calls which they had never heard before. The calls all started off with a low rumbling noise, followed by something described as a high-pitched twang. Researchers compared it to sound effects used in sci-fi films, and it wouldn't have sounded out of place in something like Star Wars. Scientists didn't believe there was anything actually extraterrestrial about the noise, but figuring out what it was wouldn't be easy. The call was heard multiple times throughout the year. This wasn't a one-off occurrence, as it's been the case with other mysterious noises. Noises such as the bloop, Julia, and train have all baffled experts over the years, but all turned out to be the sound of icebergs scraping against one another or rocks. But with the biotwang repeating so many times, it couldn't be caused by an isolated event. Scientists initially speculated that it may have been a call from a baleen whale species. Many species of whales live in the region, but they're difficult to monitor. But the call was not something scientists had ever heard before, and couldn't find the whales that might be responsible. It would take years of monitoring in the region, and the help of AI to finally crack the case. As they searched for the elusive whale, scientists recorded calls from many different species. Among those were the bride's whales. This whale is most commonly found in the warm, temperate, or tropical waters of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. Scientists recorded calls from a group of these whales around the Marianas Archipelago, and it sounded extremely similar to the infamous biotwang sound. They couldn't be certain these were the culprits, though. To do that, scientists used AI to analyze thousands of whale calls recorded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Each recording was turned into a spectrogram, which the AI could then compare against the spectrogram of the biotwang. Because the biotwang was so complex, it created a very unique-looking spectrogram, which could be easily spotted in other calls. And sure enough, the software determined that the biotwang matched bride's whale calls. Number 6. While driving along a stretch of highway late at night in early December, 2 Nebraska residents narrowly avoided losing their lives in a car accident. But as more details emerged, it became clear this was far more terrifying than either of them realized at the time. It was late on the night of Sunday, the 8th of December, and Garrison and Schuyler Beach were traveling along Highway 36, not far from Bennington. During the day, this is a busy highway, one of the many that connects Bennington and North Omaha, but it passes through more rural areas, including stretches of road surrounded by fields. At night, it's much less busy, and the Beaches seemed to be the only people around. Near 132nd Street, the couple spotted a large piece of metal that had been left in the middle of the road. They were traveling at speed and didn't have enough time to stop before they reached it. Garrison swerved the car but lost control. They broke through a guard wire, which almost came through the windshield and fell into a ravine. Luckily, neither Garrison nor Schuyler were hurt, but the car was badly damaged. They got out of the car and began to climb up out of the ditch. Waiting for them on the road was a man. As they approached the metal, the couple had spotted headlights of another car coming from the side of the road. This wasn't another traveler that was approaching Highway 36. The lights were stationary. The person was waiting for something. The man asked if they were okay and told them that he'd already alerted emergency services. He invited the couple to get into his car to wait for the authorities, but the Beaches turned him down. They were going to wait with the car until the police arrived. The stranger wasn't upset that his offer was turned down and left before the police arrived. The story would have been strange enough if it wasn't one that the Beaches had heard before. Not long before their experience, a friend named Kyle had gone through something eerily similar. While driving down the same stretch of road late at night, he'd accidentally hit a children's bike which had been left in the street. Another car then suddenly appeared behind him and stopped when Kyle did. The stranger claimed he wanted to make sure Kyle was okay and asked about the damage. Thankfully, the car wasn't too badly damaged and Kyle simply drove away. Later, he and his wife spotted the same man again, this time driving close behind a car that was leaking oil on the road. The Beaches went to the local media about the strange incident. Roughly 10 minutes from where the incident occurred, there was a landfill. It wouldn't be too strange for the bike or piece of metal to have accidentally fallen from a vehicle going there. But for the stranger to suddenly appear on both occasions, it felt like something more sinister was going on. After local media outlets reported on the strange incident, others also came forward with similar stories. The police were investigating to determine what was actually happening. In a final twist, someone phoned the news outlet multiple times, claiming to be Garrison Beach. The caller wanted the news report about the accident taken down. Both the Beaches and Kyle listened to the voicemail and claimed it sounded similar to the man they had encountered. The police had a person of interest in this case and searched a nearby home, but no arrests were made, and there's been no update on the mystery since. Number 5. For centuries, historians have puzzled over rumors of mysterious tunnels that lie hidden beneath one of Milan's cultural landmarks. A new study conducted by students at the Polytechnic University of Milan has proven the rumors are true. Sforza Castle was originally a fortress built in the 14th century. It was almost completely destroyed 100 years later, as various groups fought for control of Milan. Eventually, Francesco Sforza took control as duke and decided the site of the old fortress would be perfect for his new palace. Francesco didn't live to see his new castle completed. That happened during the reign of his son, Ludovico, who took over as duke after his father. It was Ludovico who hired some of the most famous artists of the time to create work for his palace. That included Leonardo da Vinci, who decorated various parts of the building. Most famous of these was the Room of the Wooden Boards. This was designed to look like a grove of fruit trees with various plants growing around each other. Da Vinci's work meant he got a closer look at the palace than most people would ever be able to. He wrote about this in his Codex Forster. This is a series of pocket notebooks where he made various notes and observations about engineering, geometry, and mechanics. In his notes, Da Vinci wrote about a series of tunnels that were supposedly hidden beneath the surface of the castle. These secret passageways were inaccessible to visitors, and historians could find little other information about them. If they existed, the purpose of these tunnels was also a mystery. Some speculated that they were likely for military purposes. The palace may have served as the duke's residence, but it was still a fortress. It would also be useful if there was ever an uprising, such as the fighting that had put Francesco Sforza on the throne. That way the inhabitants would have a way to escape. But even though someone as intelligent and detail-oriented as Da Vinci had written about the passageways, many historians still believe they were nothing but a myth. That was proven false in 2024 by students working on a thesis project at the Polytechnic University of Milan. The students wanted to create a digital twin of the palace and set about scanning the building to capture it in as much detail as possible. Part of the project involved using ground-penetrating radar to peer beneath the surface at what was hidden beneath. Gradually, piece by piece, the area around the palace was mapped out. What it showed wasn't just a few rooms, but many tunnels leading to and from Sforza Castle, just as Da Vinci had suggested. There was even one tunnel that connected the palace to the Basilica of Santa Maria del Grassi. The tunnel stretched for over half a mile and wasn't for clear military or defense purposes. Instead, historians believe this was for Ludovico's personal use. It was at this church that his wife was laid to rest after she passed away, and it's believed Ludovico would have used the tunnel to come and mourn in private. Number 4. In December of 2011, John and Geraldine McGee's daughter found their bodies on the floor of their home in Andover, Massachusetts. The police have recently revealed new information in this strange case in the hopes of getting to the bottom of the mystery. The McGees were known as John and Jerry in their close-knit neighborhood of Andover. It was here that they'd raised their 2 children, and where John had built up a successful house-building business. The couple had been together for 4 decades and were in their late 60s when the crime occurred. Nobody knew of any personal or business problems either of them had, which only made the events of December 13th even more disturbing. The McGee's son, John Jr., was the last person to see them alive when he visited their home that afternoon. He was there to talk about the family business and left at about 4 p.m. 20 minutes later, the couple's daughter, Holly, spoke with her mother on the phone. Both children reported nothing out of the ordinary. The following day, Holly drove to her parents' house, as she did every Wednesday. This time, she planned to leave her children with her parents so she could do some Christmas shopping. When she arrived, she noticed the front door was locked, which was strange. Her parents would usually leave it open when they were expecting someone. The garage door was open, granting Holly access to the home. It was then that she discovered her parents' bodies in the living room. John had been struck by 3 bullets, and Jerry had a single bullet wound, and neither could be saved. A search of the house turned up few clues. There were a few things out of place, like a dog leash which had been left on the kitchen counter. The couple's dog was located and appeared very irritated. The couple's TV had also been on with the volume left high. Most noticeably, the couple's SUV was missing. It was found 30 miles away in the north end of Boston. It had been set on fire, destroying any evidence that may have been inside. The police found no evidence of forced entry into the home, and it was clear this wasn't a case of robbery gone wrong. But the real motive behind the attack remained a mystery. The McGee's car had been left near the former location of a restaurant that was used as a front for the Angulo crime family. Some have speculated that this suggests John may have had some connection to organized crime, but there's no evidence of any connection, and it's more likely someone chose this location to try to mask their own motive for the crime. The McGee's burning vehicle had actually been located at about 10:30 p.m. on the night of the crime, long before anybody knew what had taken place. A witness reported seeing a man walk away from the car, but could only describe him as being of medium height and build. As the location was about an hour away from the McGee's home, police determined the crime took place no later than 9:30 p.m. The couple were also still in their day clothes and hadn't changed for bed. In a recent update to the case, the police revealed that the weapon used in the crime used .45 caliber bullets. They also believed the weapon was older. This has never been found. The police are continuing to appeal for information to help solve this disturbing mystery, and anyone with information can contact the Massachusetts State Police at 978-745-8908. Number 3. In the summer of the year 14, Roman Emperor Augustus passed away at the age of 75. Roman historians recorded this taking place in his villa near the town of Nola in southern Italy, but for centuries, exactly where this was has remained a mystery. New research and excavations by a team exploring a site near Mount Vesuvius may have uncovered the answer. Mount Vesuvius famously erupted in 79, 65 years after Augustus passed away. The devastating eruption covered the nearby towns of Pompeii and Herculaneum with ash and debris, leaving them lost for centuries. It wasn't until the 18th century that these sites began to be uncovered, but these weren't the only locations touched by the disaster. On the northern side of the volcano, the town of Somma Vesuviana was also hit, but researchers believe that it was to the south that most of the damage was done. Somma Vesuviana was left in ruins, but it was believed that this was caused by a less famous eruption that took place a few centuries later. It was still a site worth exploring, especially as it lay in the region where Augustus's mysterious villa was supposed to be. In the 1930s, researchers uncovered a grand villa in the town, and there was speculation this might finally solve the mystery, but dating techniques showed it had been built around the 2nd century, long after Augustus passed away. Those looking to solve the mystery turned elsewhere but had no luck. In 2002, researchers from the University of Tokyo returned to Somma Vesuviana and the 2nd century villa. What they uncovered was shocking. Buried beneath this villa was another one, this one much more ancient. This lower villa had been covered in rubble thousands of years ago. The newer one was constructed on top, using roughly the same footprint as its predecessor. Chemical analysis proved that the rubble in the lower villa was from the 79 CE Vesuvius eruption. The villa had been constructed before that. Further analysis of organic material left behind in the villa showed that it dated back to the time of Augustus. Of course, this didn't necessarily mean that it belonged to the famous emperor himself. Like Pompeii and Herculaneum, Somma Vesuviana was home to many luxurious homes belonging to the wealthy. The villa was equipped with a room for a private bath and a kiln where water could be heated. These were amenities someone like the emperor would have had, but it wasn't necessarily reserved for the emperor alone. What was more telling was the fact that the villa seemed to have been abandoned around the time that Augustus passed away. This is known to have happened with Augustus's estate. There was also evidence that some construction work had taken place, but was disrupted by the 79 CE eruption. This could point to the villa being turned into a place of worship. Augustus's villa is known to have been consecrated after he passed away. The evidence seems promising, but researchers haven't been able to say for certain if the mystery has actually been solved. What we do know is that Somma Vesuviana was hit much more significantly by the famous Vesuvius eruption than was first thought. Knowing this, it's possible there may be more secrets buried beneath the rubble of buildings destroyed in this 2nd century eruption. Number 2. In 1988, a group of divers made a disturbing discovery in a river in Peterborough, Ontario. For over 35 years, the case remained cold, but new information could finally solve this strange mystery. It was July 10, 1988, and recreational divers were exploring underwater in the Otonabee River. Just south of Loch 19, they spotted something strange wedged between a log and a rock. On closer examination, they discovered it was a human skull. The police were immediately called to the scene. Only the skull and a few neck bones had been found by the divers. Search teams combed through the river and surrounding areas for any sign of the rest of the remains, but they unfortunately turned up nothing. With so little, there wasn't much the police could determine about the individual. They knew the remains belonged to a man, aged between 40 and 74 years old at the time that he passed away. He was likely a smoker and was missing most of his molars. He may have had some dark facial hair, but it was difficult to determine. One thing the police did know was that someone had taken his life. He was met with foul play, and someone had deliberately removed his head from the rest of his body. The police looked into the possibility that this had been done accidentally after he was placed into the water, possibly by a boat propeller, but this didn't line up with the evidence. Despite appeals for information at the time, nobody came forward to identify the man, who was given the nickname the Otonabee River Man. He also didn't match any known missing person cases in the area. Without this information, there were few investigative avenues that investigators could go down, and the case went cold. Over the decades, the case has been re-examined by new investigators. They looked for any clue that might have been missed previously and used new technology to try to find new clues. In 2021, this new technology was genetic genealogy. The police began to work with a Texas-based company to analyze DNA extracted from the remains. They were able to create a profile for the Otonabee River Man and identify relatives. After checking with those relatives, investigators could finally confirm his identity in 2024. The Otonabee River Man was Gerald DeRocher. Gerald would have been 36 years old when he passed away. He lived a nomadic lifestyle and had connections across Ontario and into British Columbia. Gerald's last known home was the Ottawa area, where his family and partner also lived. As Gerald moved around a lot, it makes sense why he was never reported missing. Unfortunately, due to the time that has passed, the police haven't been able to identify much information about Gerald. He had no known links in the area where he was found, but it's possible this was an area he frequented. Other places where Gerald was known include the Vendôme Hotel in Ottawa, where Gerald often hung out. The hotel has since closed down, and the people who were once regulars are more difficult to track down. Identifying Gerald has helped to answer questions for his family, who would have no idea that he was the subject of such a strange mystery. but it doesn't solve the mystery of what actually happened to him. The police are seeking information that can help to find out who put Gerald in the river and why. Anyone with information in this case can contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477 or online at stopcrimehere.ca. Number 1. The disappearance of Brandon Lawson is one of the most famous missing person cases in the United States. At the end of 2024, Brandon's family were able to provide an update that solved one part of this strange mystery. Brandon was 26 years old when he went missing under strange circumstances in August of 2013. His family helped to lead extensive searches of the area where he disappeared, but it wouldn't be until 2022 that human remains were located. Another 2 years would pass before DNA could confirm that the remains belonged to Brandon. It was just before midnight on August 7, 2013, that Brandon was last seen. Brandon lived in San Angelo, Texas, with his partner of 10 years, Ledessa. The couple had 3 children together, and Ledessa was the stepmother of Brandon's 4th child, a daughter from an earlier relationship. The couple had recently welcomed their 4th child into the world, and Brandon was working long hours to support his family. The day before his disappearance, Brandon didn't return home. This caused an argument, and Brandon left the house shortly before midnight. He intended to go to his father's house in Fort Worth, about 3 hours away. Not long after he left, Ledessa called Brandon's brother, Kyle. She knew his truck didn't have much gas, and he would probably be calling to ask for help soon. She left a gas can outside the house, put her phone on to charge in her car, and went to bed for the night. Ledessa had been right. At about 12:30 a.m., Brandon called Kyle to say he'd run out of gas and needed help. But this wasn't just an ordinary call for roadside assistance. Brandon sounded panicked and claimed that Ledessa had gotten a group of Mexicans in his neighborhood to chase him out of town. Kyle asked if Brandon had taken anything and thought that his brother might be hallucinating. Brandon denied taking anything illegal, but Kyle still believed Brandon was being paranoid. Despite this, he knew his brother needed help and set out with his girlfriend and son to bring him gas. The 2 brothers shared multiple phone calls over the next hour. They were always short, and Brandon would only say a few sentences before hanging up. At about 1:20 a.m., Kyle called to get Brandon's precise location. He knew Brandon was somewhere on US 277 near the Colorado River, but he didn't know specifically where. Brandon sounded out of breath, as if he'd been running, and said that he was wounded. Kyle wasn't the only person Brandon had called. At 12:50 a.m., Brandon phoned 911. He said he was in a field, but claimed someone was chasing him into the woods. He said he'd run into the person and alleged that someone had been fired at. When asked if he needed an ambulance, Brandon first said yes, but then clarified that he needed the police. At 1:30 a.m., Kyle arrived at the site of Brandon's abandoned vehicle. At the same time, the police arrived. They'd actually been called by a passing motorist who reported the abandoned truck. Kyle was on the phone to his brother at the time. Brandon could see them, but was hiding somewhere. When the police showed up, Brandon told him to run, but Kyle refused. For several hours, Kyle and the police searched the stretch of road where Brandon's car had been found. The only sign that anybody had been there were indentation marks on a nearby tree. Brandon was nowhere to be found. Over the next weeks, months, and years, Brandon's family would lead searches to try to find out what happened to him. The local police believed Brandon was no longer in the county and thought that he might have been picked up by another motorist. Despite this, the focus of the searches remained on the area where Brandon's vehicle was located. People speculated about what might have happened to him. The 911 phone call was released, and some believed they could hear a weapon being fired in the audio. Kyle believed this was the sound of vehicles driving on a bridge over the river. He believed his brother was paranoid, but couldn't determine whether illegal substances were involved in the disappearance. In 2022, a search roughly a mile from where Brandon's vehicle was abandoned finally turned up a clue. Clothing resembling what Brandon was last seen wearing was found. The police were called in to investigate the clue, and human remains were found nearby. After 9 years, the state of the remains meant it would be DNA testing that determined whether this was Brandon or not. His family were confident this was their missing loved one, though. Finally, on Christmas Day of 2024, they were able to share that this was in fact Brandon. Questions still remain about what happened that August night. With the amount of time that has passed in this mystery, it's possible these questions may never be answered. But Brandon's family now have some sort of closure. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.